If you have a true strange story of the unexplained you'd like to hear read on the podcast, email it to madamestrangeways@gmail.com or go to madamestrangeways.com or just check the show notes for a link. I can't wait to read it. Welcome to Madame Strangeways, where I, Madame Strangeways, am your guide beyond the veil, past the twilight zone, and smack dab in the middle of the strange and unusual. Today, I have two new true strange stories for you. As always, solicited or not, usually not, I share my thoughts and observations after each spooky tale. But first, a huge Madame Strangeways thank you to my two Patreon supporters, TJ Hodder and G-Man Music. Welcome, G-Man Music. And if you want to hear your name read at the beginning of every single episode, well, then all you have to do is go to patreon.com/madamestrangeways or just check the show notes. I've got a link there for you. But wait, there's more. You will also get access to special bonus content such as a guided sleep meditation, obviously narrated by yours truly, where I will lull you to sleep with my dulcet tones. And there's definitely not any sort of subconscious subliminal messaging. Definitely not. That would be weird. Anyway, on to the strange stories here on Madame Strangeways. Story number 1 by Onomatopoeia Utopia. I graduated high school in 1998 and was dating a girl with all kinds of issues who I should not have been seeing. My mother said if I stayed in a relationship with her, I could not live at home. We lived in a small rural town, and my girlfriend's home was several miles away. I decided to live in my car. Smart, I know, while I figured things out. I would park my car at the gate entrance to a field near her home and sleep there at night, walking through some woods and across the field when I left her house. Her 2 dogs would follow me to the car and then go back home after I was inside. Not far into my new setup, one night as I approached my car, I swear I heard the beat of drums. Not drum set drumming, but like tribal-sounding drums. It was somewhat faint, but it was distinct in the silence of the rural area. It was then I recalled the stories I had heard in elementary school of a supposedly satanic cult in the area. They had some land at the end of a dead-end road about a mile north of where I was parked. I became instantly scared and climbed into my car quickly. The back seat would fold down and I could fit halfway into the trunk of the car. That's how I slept for the several weeks I lived there. Every night, I could hear the drums. One night, the dogs didn't leave my car. Rather, I awoke to them growling at something, bumping the underside of my vehicle as they moved around beneath me. The final straw came one night after getting into my car, as I sat in the driver's seat preparing to climb into the back. I happened to make out a silhouette against the horizon in the field I had just crossed. It was a human form, made of shadow, silhouetted against the less dark night sky. Thinking my girlfriend or her father, who didn't know I was out there, followed me, I turned on my headlights to verify who, and discovered that nobody stood in the field. I had enough of that and drove about 10 miles away to the parking lot of a rural church and felt better sleeping there. Needless to say, that relationship did not last, and I moved on to other things not long after that. Almost a year later, I became friends with an older lady who lived nearby. I found out she happened to live on the dead-end road where I swore I heard the drum sounds coming from. I asked her one time if she ever had any strange experiences or any harassment from the cult at the end of the road. She told me that the cult had been gone for about a decade at that time, and they had left before her family even moved onto the street, but she did have odd things happening there after first moving in. She said that her 3 daughters would routinely see shadowy figures moving outside between the trees on their property, and also hear what she called Indian drums. She said this having no idea what had happened to me. Once, she said her youngest daughter, 4 years old at the time, was sitting by the stereo speakers in the living room with her ear up to them. Someone in the family asked her what she was doing, and she said, "Listening." They found it somewhat humorous because the stereo wasn't on, and asked her what she was listening to. The young daughter looked at them and replied, "They say there is justification in killing your parents." I knew then that what I experienced almost a year before was not the cult that had long ago moved away, but something far sinister that had remained in the area. Onomatopoeia Utopia. Wow, what a name, first of all. So many vowels, very vowely. But second of all, ladies, and you know what, everybody, this is a perfect example of if he wanted to, he would. If he wanted to, he would sleep in his car and risk life and limb by a satanic cult and also shadow people. Come on. Onomatopoeia Utopia, you are setting an example. The bar is high. The bar is set very high now. Before we get to the kids being scary, because kids are scary, before we get to the end, which was very creepy, the figure that you saw in the darkness in the field that disappeared when you turned your headlights on. Of course you drove 10 miles away, which is far. Of course you drove far, far away to sleep somewhere safe where there presumably wasn't shadow people lurking around in the darkness, at least that you could see. I'm not mad that the relationship didn't last, if only because you then didn't have to sleep in your car and go through that anymore. But again, before we get to the creepy kid, I want to take a moment because, of course, I have been doing more reading of my most recent favorite book, The Exorcist Effect, by Joseph Laycock and Eric Harrelson, which I have talked at length about in the Annabelle episode and will continue to talk about in future episodes because, like I said, it is my new current favorite book. So in the Satanic Panic chapter, which is definitely going to be a deep dive of mine at some point, but I don't know how many chapters it's going to take. I don't know how many episodes it'll take because there's so much to say. But in the Satanic Panic chapter, where they were talking specifically about, Satanic Panic has led to there being a fear of these satanic cults. So I'm actually going to read, I tried to, I just did a few takes and I'm not explaining it really well. So I'm just going to read this quick excerpt from the book. So it says, however, there is one significant variation when analyzing fantasies of evil rituals, and this concerns whether the religious other resides in the country or in the city. The fantasy of the country cult invokes a fear of archaic religion that has somehow endured in parts of the world that modernity has never reached. In the fantasy of the city cult, the cultists live among us and are often elites. They not only participate in modernity, but are largely responsible for it, having corrupted social institutions for generations. These categories manifest in both conspiracy theories and films. So, the satanic cult mentioned in this story would be a perfect example of a country cult, because I actually reached out to Onomatopoeia Utopia, and they were super helpful and gave me some more information that this occurred in a little unincorporated town of North Texas, about an hour west of Fort Worth. So an unincorporated town is definitely the definition of country. And, supposedly this cult had kind of been out of the area for about a decade, I think. Either that was in a note that they sent me or it was in the story. Either way, that lines with the 80s and Satanic Panic. And, Oprah was talking about it, like daytime talk shows were talking about it. This was in the news. It was huge all over the place. And so, yeah, I think it's completely fair that the people of this unincorporated town, I think that's completely fair that they would have thought that there were satanic rituals or satanic cults going on there. In fact, law enforcement actually had trainings in the 80s, maybe even the early 90s actually. I have not double checked my dates for this, but I'm eyeballs deep in the Satanic Panic right now. So literally, law enforcement, the police, were being trained on how to spot satanic rituals, on how to spot like satanic ritual abuse in children. And none of this was real. And all of this was debunked. And people actually went to prison for nothing because it wasn't happening. It's super sad. It's incredibly tragic. And it's just crazy to think that, yeah, cops were actually getting taught how to identify if something is satanic or not, when really that wasn't really happening. Like, that wasn't really happening. However, if there wasn't a cult or like the remnants of a cult, then what was the drumming? What was the drumming? If it wasn't them, I mean, I guess it's possible that there were some indigenous people still living on the land and y'all just didn't know. Or was it ghosts? I mean, they didn't seem like friendly ghosts. They definitely seemed like threatening ghosts who did not want you there sleeping in your car. Although maybe they were just looking out for you. Maybe they were just worried. Maybe they were concerned ghosts. But I wanted to give an idea of what I was kind of thinking in terms of like tribal drums. So I actually looked up some indigenous drum chants, specifically that might have been used around the area. So here is my interpretation of Wichita Duya, which is a water song. So I want you to imagine hearing that in the middle of the night in the dark, because there aren't any lights around, because this is an unincorporated town. You're sleeping in your car. And just imagine that was like real drums, like scary sounding, like big drums, like tribal sounding drums, which are not inherently scary, but lots of things that are not inherently scary become extremely scary when they are happening in the middle of the night and you are alone and there is no light and you feel unsafe. So just imagine that. Otherwise, that's a perfectly good intentioned song. It is supposed to bring the rain. It's supposed to bring the rain. Okay, finally onto the onto the scariest part, which is the 4-year-old. I like how you just kind of like tack this on at the end, and it's so scary. So, I would assume that a normal 4-year-old probably doesn't have the vocabulary to be able to know what justification means, and is probably not watching the kind of content in which they would learn, or that they would think to talk about killing their parents. I mean, like, there weren't parental controls in 1998. So, I mean, I definitely was exposed to a lot of content, terrifying, traumatic content that I should not have been watching when I was a child. And so maybe that was the case here, but What's scarier to imagine is, yeah, whatever's behind this drumming, if it's not well intentioned and it's not just the water song, if it was a far more insidious intent, are they, is that, is this entity behind the drums also the one whispering, presumably through the speakers where only this 4-year-old can hear? There's justification in killing your parents. If I had it, this is why there is not little baby Madame Strangeways. There's no Madame Strangeways Jr. rolling around. Okay. And I'll tell you why. Because if I had a 4-year-old and they told me that, I don't know what I would do. I don't know what I would do. Like, hello, police? I don't know. 911. What do you do? What do you do? You have to live with this child in your home after they say that. And you have to pretend like you're the adult, so you're brave and you're courageous and that doesn't bother you. And then you're laying in bed staring at the ceiling, eyes wide open. And when you do sleep, you got to sleep with one eye open to make sure that your child doesn't come and murder you. Awful. Do not like. I will say, going back to the form that you saw in the field in the dark, and then when you put your headlights on, they were gone. I did see a TikTok, and I tried to find it just now, and I did not try very hard. But if you know what it is, let me know. But there's there's a phenomena that happens in phenomena. Da, 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 da. It's impossible. I can't help it. It's a compulsion. And it actually is really annoying. So anyway, it's a phenomena where in the fog, the way that the wind is blowing and the way that like the sun or like light or, you know, even if it's just sunlight reflecting off of the moon, I would imagine that it makes it look like there are human figures moving in the mist. And it looks like they're kind of coming through the fog toward you, and then no one is coming toward you. So I will say that there is a phenomena. God, how many times can I say that word and not sing it? Damn you, Muppets. You know, so there is a phenomena that explains it. Man, that's like there's a fifth time. The point is that there is a reason. There is an explanation for something similar to that happening, whether or not that is what happened in this case. Me personally, I don't want it to be an evil entity that's also behind drumming and that is also whispering in little girls' ears that there's justification in killing their parents. I don't want that. Unfortunately, Onomatopoeia Utopia, you don't really have that luxury because it did happen to you. And I'm sure the terror that you experienced, I know the terror that you experienced was very, very real. And I imagine that there's just no way to explain it that will explain that primal terror that you experienced that night. So I'm sorry, or multiple nights. I'm sorry that you had to experience that. I'm sorry that you had to sleep in your car. Sounds awful. But on a happy note, I did love that the dogs walked you to your car every night. That was really sweet. Aw, that's sweet. Thank you so much for letting me read your story. I really appreciated it. And if anyone has a similar story that they'd like to hear read on the show, please go ahead. Email it to me at madamestrangeways@gmail.com. Girl's Voice Telling Us to Stop It by OMG Real UFO. Hey guys, I was hoping for a bit of advice or to try and get some answers. I've had a couple of experiences that I am unable to explain. I'll start from the first incident when I was around 11 years old and my brother was 14. We lived in a new build home in Wales. Very normal looking house, and it definitely did not feel or look haunted. We found a couple of strange things in the back garden when we were younger, such as old bottles and a pair of old broken sunglasses. Not sure if it's related or not, but thought I'd mention it. One of the first strange things that happened was when my mom called us downstairs as, for some reason, there was a glass of milk on our kitchen table that was full to the brim. Like, it was so full, if you moved it, it would spill. My brother and I had no idea, as neither of us did it. We went to the living room for something, and when we came back, the glass of milk was empty. Weird, but didn't think much of it. Fast forward a couple of weeks later, me and my brother were playing the Sims game on the computer. It was only me and him in the house, as my mother was working late. We were creating a new sim when all of a sudden, something came between me and my brother's ear and said, "Stop it." It was the creepiest thing I've ever heard in my life, and still to this day, I can hear it. It was really unnatural. I could almost feel the breath, and it freaked us both out. We both turned and looked at each other and said, "Did you hear that?" We both jumped out of our seats and ran to the other room, called our mother and told her, and she just chalked it up as our imagination. But whatever happened to us was real and definitely happened. I've done a bit of research on it and have found that ghosts do sometimes whisper stuff in your ears. Freaky stuff. Fast forward to a few years later. Nothing paranormal after the milk and whispering ghost girl thing incident, but then there was one night when I was in bed. I had a TV in the bedroom, and the street lights outside would make the screen reflect stuff so I could see things in my hallway, etc. It was around 3 a.m. when I randomly woke up, and I saw what looked like a woman in a white gown walk into my bathroom, and the door shut behind them. Freaked me right out. I said to myself, it's probably my brother, as he had a white dressing gown. I decided to get up and have a look. I knocked on the door, expecting my brother to reply, but there was no answer. So I opened the door, and there was nobody in there. Scared the shit out of me. I ran back to bed and pulled the sheets over my head, then ended up falling asleep. I told my mom and brother about it, but they both just said I must have been dreaming. Weird. Other than those incidents, nothing else really happened. Until now. So fast forward to today. I'm now 28. I completely forgot about the whispering ghost girl until my brother brought it up to me a couple weeks ago. Once I started to remember it, some strange shit started happening. Now, this only happens when I'm at work. It's never happened in my flat or anywhere else. But basically, I was sitting in the work canteen having my lunch, and in the corner of my eye, I saw what looked like a man in an orange hoodie with his hood up and blue jeans. When I turn to look, it disappears. It doesn't happen every day, but it happens a lot. Always the same, orange hoodie and blue jeans. Now, where I work is right next to Cardiff Central train station. I'm not sure if that's linked at all. Maybe a death on the railway or something. But I'm still seeing this orange hoodie man to this day, and I just want to know what people think. I've never seen their face as their head is down with the hood up. Am I more open to paranormal things or spirits because of what happened when I was younger? Or am I just going crazy? Any advice or help would be greatly appreciated. OMG real UFO. I'm going to do a little bit of just a small amount, just a small amount of victim blaming, because what were you and your brother getting up to on The Sims? What were you doing? I have questions. Were you making an exceptionally ugly sim? Were you making that sim a vampire? Were you making them a never nude? Or maybe you're remembering wrong. You weren't just building sims. You were trapping them in houses and then setting the houses on fire, or putting them in the pool and removing the ladder from the pool. If that's not how you play The Sims, that's wild to me. That's the only way that I know to play The Sims. So maybe that's what you were up to, and that ghost was saying, cut that out. Cut out those Sim shenanigans. Although they could have been a little bit more polite about it. But when it comes to the things that you experienced as a kid in that house growing up, maybe if you're seeing that through the lens of the paranormal being normal, like if you were raised and the paranormal was normal, super normal, hold on a second. What's the opposite of paranormal? Hold on. What does para even mean in paranormal? Hold, please. Good news, everyone. I have an answer. And the prefix para, like paragraph, paratrooper, paranormal, that suffix has many meanings, including alongside of, beside, near, resembling, beyond, apart from, and abnormal. So I would assume paranormal would be the abnormal, but then does paranormal, so does that mean that paranormal is just abnormal normal? Abnormal normal? Perhaps Abby normal? There's something abnormal, Abby normal? Perinormal. That's got to be something someone's come up with. Anyway, moving on to your question. Are you crazy, or has your past experience with the paranormal made you more susceptible? Well, number one, I don't think you're going crazy. I am not a medical professional. I am not in any position to diagnose anyone with anything. However, it does not sound like you're going crazy. Even if you are hallucinating this orange hoodie man, that still doesn't mean you're going crazy. I've talked at length about how normal it is to have hallucinations. Obviously, in some cases, hallucinations are not normal, but still doesn't make you crazy. Okay. I do feel very strongly about getting rid of the stigma around the hallucinations that we all experience every single day. But I'm not going to harp on that right now. Here is what I'm going to jump on, though, is asking the internet, especially Reddit, especially paranormal or perinormal subreddits, especially those, asking them, because I see this a lot, people post their story and they ask, like, is this a demon? Is this paranormal? Is this supernatural? Is a demon hunting me? Am I being haunted? Am I cursed? Is there, did a witch put a curse on me? Like, these are the questions that people ask a lot on these subreddits. And I can tell that it's being asked with a huge amount of anxiety. And I think people just want, an expert to tell them what it is. Tell me what it is, because uncertainty and not knowing is terrible, right? You feel out of control. You feel like if you could just know the answer, then you can start making moves to find a solution, right? But if you don't know what's wrong, then how can you fix it? And it's scary. However, asking Reddit if you're being possessed, they're going to tell you yes. There are a small but very active group of people, especially, that comment on these threads. And if you say, do you think this is a ghost? They are definitely going to respond and tell you, yes, definitely. Or actually, it's worse than a ghost. Actually, it's a demon. What it sounds like you're working with there is a demon. And they're going to tell you, as if they are an expert, which they are not, spoiler alert, they are going to tell you with so much confidence how to fix it. They're going to say, you need to sage your bedroom, or you need to sage the room that you're experiencing, sage the whole house. You need to sage. You need to go buy some crystals. Also, you need to say a prayer in whichever God's name. Well, let me tell you, to me, that is fear-mongering, and I hate it. It's along the lines of Ed and Lorraine Warren So if you're not listening to my series on the Warren's case files, starting with the Amityville Horror, moving on to Annabelle. I'm not doing it in alphabetical order, but I think MN. I am. Wow, that's completely on accident. I just realized that. Anyway, listen to those because I do have a problem with people who are fear mongering, especially when it comes to invisible things like ghosts and demons. Because how do you prove them wrong? But they're not experts. They don't know. They have no idea what's going on in your life. They do not know. They are just some rando on the internet. And definitely do not take advice from these people if you see them giving advice. They don't know any better. They don't. They did not attend the Winchester School for Demon Hunting. All right, they didn't. I don't care what they tell you. So just as an FYI, just remember, if you're looking for advice on the internet about your supernatural situation, a lot of the time people are going to take advantage of your question and your vulnerability. And you are being vulnerable sharing this online to a bunch of strangers. And they're going to take advantage of it to spread fear and potentially to spread their religion. So I take issue with it. Just take everything that they say with a grain of salt and don't ever let a rando on the internet on a paranormal internet group. Don't ever let them scare you. Don't listen to them because they don't know. They don't know. They don't know you. They don't know your situation. So just a warning. I don't know either. I have no idea what's going on in this situation. And I'm going to be honest and tell you I don't know. But here's what I do know. I did some digging into deaths that happened at or around the Cardiff Central train station. So there are deaths at the station related to the train or related to the rail, but there's just not any detail on them. It's basically like a person died, but it wasn't suspicious, so there's not going to be an inquest. The end. So there's not really much to go on there. I did find the death of one man whose name I'm not going to share because I'm not trying to make this a conspiracy theory, but you could easily find it if you searched yourself, where he died and they found his body 2 weeks later in the bushes near the central train station. I think this was like around like prime pandemic years. Unfortunately, in all the photos of him, he's never wearing an orange hoodie. That's not to say he never owned one or never wore one. It's not to say that he didn't die in one, but it didn't pan out. It's a possibility, but probably not a probability. So I'm all out of leads. Sorry I couldn't track down who your orange hoodie person was. I don't even think I talked about the milk thing. Really quickly, let's touch on the milk because I don't think I have drank a cup of milk, like a glass of milk, like alone since I was a child. I don't even know if I ever just drank just a glass of milk. That sounds like psychotic behavior to me, to like a full glass all the way to the top where if it moved even a little bit, it would spill. That's already kind of scary. But then the thought that like you left the room, you came back and it's totally empty. So this ghost just straight up like shotgunned a glass of milk, like nary an Oreo to be seen, no other cookies or I guess biscuits, as I assume you would say. The concept of just having a glass of milk straight up, no chaser. That's crazy. Maybe that's the scariest part of this story is that thought. So OMG Real UFO, thank you so much for letting me share this story. But since your name has UFO in it, I'm gonna need you to have a UFO story and I'm gonna need you to let me read it. So just get on that. If you haven't seen a UFO, I'm gonna need you to figure it out, see a UFO, and then write it up and then send it to me. Hopefully it's not traumatic. So thanks. Appreciate it in advance. Thank you so much for listening to these spooky stories. Remember that you can feel afraid and not be in danger. So if you have a true strange story that you'd like to hear read on the show, go ahead and send it to me, madamestrangeways@gmail.com or madamestrangeways.com. And since word of mouth is so important for podcasts, if you could do me just one little weird, spooky, strange solid, that would be amazing. And that would be telling your friends about the show. I'd really appreciate it. Madame Strangeways is produced and narrated by me, Madame Strangeways. Theme music is by Marina Ryan at marinamakes.co. All stories are read with the explicit permission from their original authors. Thank you so much for listening. See you next time. We both jumped out of our seats and ran to the other room, called our mother and told her, and just as she chalked it up, God damn it. I thought I was really doing something there.